our mindset with deathmatch wrestling is, and it was definitely the mindset that we had when we started to first get approached about wanting to do, and we got approached literally probably the first show that we did with DMD. It was like, oh, okay, when are we doing death matches? And for us, because we were so green, we just said maybe a couple of years. Wait until we can properly do a hurricane off the top rope first and comfortable with that. But our approach with deathmatch wrestling is that violence violence is used to drive something that you're telling, right? And violence is something that you escalate with. If you started with something heavy set violence, then you're essentially telling the most passionate aspect of whatever you're talking about. And then where do you go from there? So with that mindset, to us, deathmatch wrestling is what it would be the penultimate or conclusion of something that we're trying to talk about. And because of that, it requires an escalation. And that was our mindset with deathmatch wrestling was we're not just going to start with it. We're going to get our footing in with everything else that we can possibly do and establish ourselves as, I guess, amateur Greco-Roman, style professional wrestlers before we start to explore, that level of violence, right? And when we wrestled Akira, that was the story that we told. And I'll talk about this in a second, how Akira goes about planning a match. That itself is a fantastic fucking journey, just to watch that happen. But when we started to put together that experience, it was, well, what's the story here? And I don't think that's something that's discussed a lot when it comes to preparing a lot of death matches, or at least some of the ones that we've seen. What are you trying to tell with what you're doing here? And if your answer to me is, I'm just trying to hurt the other guy with as much light tubes as possible, then what have you done differently to the match that happened 3 matches ago? Right? Well, what have you done differently to the match that happened last week? For us, the story was, we have never done a death match or have been a part of a match that is this violent because we have never had to get this violent in any of the fights that we've had. That makes them the deadliest people that we've ever versed. And in order to overcome you, we need to steer into that violence and possibly explore something that we've never done or had to do before. And we hope that was the kind of story that we tried to put in with that match, was that we tried to wrestle them. And the moment that we realized that wrestling deathmatch wrestlers wasn't going to work against them, that was when we started to say, here's a light tube. And we made one light tube seem so significant that eventually escalated into chairs, into bundles, into, I took a gusset in the head, probably the most painful thing I've ever done. And it was a series of escalations to say that we required violence to beat violent people. Now, Akira putting together a match, this brother is like a whirlwind of creativity. Working with Akira is probably both the most chaotic and most fun thing I think I've ever had to do. The man just comes in there with sequences and he throws them out there. Yeah, he goes, okay, well, I'm thinking, all right, we'll do this, and how about at some point in the match we go do this, and this. We haven't even worked out the standard stuff at this point, right? How are we starting? How are we finishing? What's the heat shine and comeback look like? There's none of that. It's sequences. And he goes, okay, it'd be cool if we did this spot that kind of looked like this. And Ricky and I sit there and we're just like, brother, what? What are you talking about? What's the shine, man? What are you doing? And it wasn't until we had all of the sequences out there, and it's about 40 minutes before we're meant to go curtains, before the brother, fantastic man, turns around and goes, all right, now let's talk about how we're going to get into the shine here. All right, now let's talk about how we're going to escalate and get to particular points. And that's where we all started to collaborate. But his mindset with wrestling, fantastic. I like it. He's got infinite success in front of him, Akira.
Yeah. I mean, as far as like going in there, like when you had the match, was there like stipulations going into the match that it was going to be a death match, or was it like gimmickly supposed to be you just having a regular match and then it turns into that?
No, it was marketed as a death match. It was something that we definitely signed on in advance and knew that we were doing a death match.
Oh, no,
It
I wasn't
was,
saying that. I was just saying, like, was it sold to the fans as a death match before the show,
Story
or
was
was it like a
it's
regular match? And then,
story.
like, now we
no,
got
so
to.
it was. I think it was sold as a death match. I think it definitely was marketed as a death match. And that's why I guess, like, I can't remember if there was any fanfare regarding it. But a lot of whatever was the draw for that match was that this was BDE's first death match. How are they going to go up against two of possibly the best that this scene has in Callum Butcher and Akira, right? Like that was what it was. On one side, it's two guys who are currently your tag team champions in a deathmatch company. Now they're going to have to actually have a deathmatch. Can they do that, right? And that with that right there, you had a story. And that was all we really wanted to do when we went into that match, was to make it a BDE match, right? And when I say BDE match, we obviously hit our stuff and get it all in, but turn it into a death matchy. But we wanted to tell something to the crowd, right? Like, even if it's something so subtle as being, these guys don't know what the fuck they're doing in deathmatch wrestling. Them getting hit with a light tube is going to hurt them so much more than if someone else who's done deathmatch match league is going to get hit with a light tube. And that's what we kind of needed to impart. So as soon as we did take that, and as soon as it became a death match, it escalated really quickly, because that's when we looked our most vulnerable. And if we go back, and we've watched it a few times since, and that's, I think we deliver quite well on showing that as soon as it's no longer in our control, we are in dire panic. And there's a lot of desperate situation moments and us acting completely out of character because we're starting to steer into this mindset of, oh no, wait a minute, this is a death match. Like, how do deathmatch wrestlers wrestle? So we need to become that. But yeah, that's what it was marketed as. This was BDE's first death match. We're saying, you never say never. I know Ricky said that, and it's something that we'll say again. You never say never. It's something that I like to look at death matches as, it's a special match. It needs to be something that, if BDE is going up against a particular tag team, yes, we are currently the champions, so there can always be the need for a death match, right? Like, there can always be a logic to have a death match when you're fighting BDE, just because it's a death match. You can always use the story of, you're not death match wrestlers, so when I fight you, I want it to be a death match, right?
It just needs to be told right.
Story works.
We need something. Right.
Exactly. That's my only issue with that. But that's my issue with all pro. It just needs to be told right. If something's told right, it's amazing. You know what I mean? How did you cope after you've having those matches? How did your body feel? How did were you battered? Were you shaken? Were you what did I just do? How was your mindset?
The adrenaline is a funny thing, boys. I don't know how often you've gotten yourself in a particular situation where the lights go out in your head and you're running blind, and there's a whole sense of a person in there that you've never seen before. It's a funny fucking thing, man, but God, is it a fickle thing too. In the match, we bumped on glass, we bumped through Legos, gusset plate to their head, blood, sweat everywhere. I don't recall feeling a single thing in that ring as it was all transpiring. Not a single thing. I took like three suplexes on Legos, safest bumps I've ever taken in my career.
Really?
I took a brain buster. I didn't feel any of that. Like, adrenaline is a fantastic thing. That Monday, when I had the shower later that night, and I realized I had completely cut up my calf because for some reason my boots just didn't do a good enough job of covering me. When I went out to brunch the next morning to just to de-stress before the work the next day, my wrist was killing me. My head was still kind of oozing out a little bit of blood because gussets don't really scab when they're just in the hairline. It's my body suffered for a little bit after that, and because of that, did we turn around and say, "Fuck, is there a new level of appreciation for what Joel Bateman, Callum Butcher do on a fucking weekly basis? How do they do that?" I'm hurt after just that, so I can only imagine how they feel.
I think some people are just, you know what I mean, like deathmatch wrestling.
Man, you're built different for that shit. And look, we're not built different energy when it comes to deathmatch wrestling, man. Okay, let's be honest.
No, my take is you definitely built different to do deathmatch wrestling, but I feel like for the most part, when you see deathmatch wrestlers, and I've said this before, it's because they probably can't get booked to do anything else. And like that's and I mean, I'm not trying to shit on people, and I'm not shitting on the people you mentioned at all. I'm talking about as a whole, because you look at a lot of these deathmatch wrestlers, and a lot of them don't look like they even go to a gym and do all that sort of shit. I'm a fan of deathmatch wrestling, but I've seen it like over the last 20 years, it's changed.
And that's my point. I'm not against it at all. If it's done right, I'm happy to do it. But a lot of times when I do see it, as you said, I'm seeing guys with their footwork off, their timing off. The way they position themselves, their feeding, the way they move. It's like, well, have they been trained? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
I scratch my head and go, and then they turn around. Oh, it's an art. I get it. It's an art. But you got to be an artist to create the art. You know what I mean? So you got to do the fundamentals. I remember back in the day, and I used to watch. So you had Lobo in Australia, you had Spike Steele, Mad Dog, and the one thing that they did do, and this is really important, and I'll give props to them, is they learned how to work first. Their timing with all that, I remember Spike Steele and Lobo had this incredible. This incredible match, and they'll come through tables and everything, but it was just so well timed, and the way they moved and fed, so it wasn't just one big bloodbath. It made sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So look, it can be done right, but you gotta train yourself from the bottom up, learn your fundamentals, and then do it. As I said, a lot of the times I see a lot of guys just hitting each other. It's like, okay, is there? And then you see their movements. They're going, well, they haven't really been taught how to work. You know what I mean? So that's the way I look at it. That's what disappoints me about it. But apart from that, if it's done right,
it's
if
beautiful.
it's done right, it's great. But if any match is done right, it's great.
Yeah.
There's different types. I get that, and there's room for everything. But you can't defend something if you're not trained. You know what I'm sorry. Yeah, people aren't trained. They don't. They're trying to defend a product. It's like, oh, hang on a sec. Oh, you can't shit on that product. But hang on a sec. I'm not shitting on the product. I'm shitting on what you do, because what you do isn't the way it should be done. Teach yourself how to do certain basic fundamentals, and then go do that. You know what I mean? But a lot of it's not done. They've just gone for the high spot, and they never learned, basic wrist lock. You know what I mean? So
Preacher, brother.
that's it. So that's my thing on deathmatch. I don't have like a quality of which match is great, because there's so many matches out there that you work if it's done right. So, and we all know that.
Yeah, and you preaching to the choir, Zuck. That's and we're not going to pretend like we're veterans in this business. We're not. We're not even 2 years in yet. But it's exactly that. Like, we're not. I think the specificity there is that you're not shitting on the subgenre, right? You're not. It's not like you're saying I am a science fiction guy, but I fucking hate fiction, right? It's not. You're just hating some fiction that's written, right? But you don't hate the genre, right?
I love horror films, but some of them fucking suck. You know what I mean? And some of the acting in it is shit. And I'm like, oh my God, like, it's the same thing. You know what I mean? It's not that I hate that, because I watch all types of movies. It's just one of those things.
That. You're not hating the subgenre. You're hating a product that's being developed.
No, and it gets misinterpreted to the people that get defensive. And the ones that get defensive, I bet my balls they can't fucking work properly. I bet my balls. If you knew how to work properly, it wouldn't be an issue, because I can do different matches as well. I've done cage matches, whatnot, simple matches, ladder matches, but I don't defend all that. I don't need to defend that. I defend wrestling. It's wrestling as a whole.
Wrestling. Good.
I defend that. I don't go, oh, you're shitting on deathmatch. Well, no, you know what I mean? I shit on what you do, because what you do doesn't work. Or if it does, you need a lot of work, to fix your issue. So it's just, I've always been a student of the game, a person that actually watched it, watch all the small stuff. And when people don't get that footwork right and the feeding right and all that kind of stuff, then they haven't been taught properly. And that's one thing that disappoints me. But that's general with all wrestling. You know what I mean? Nothing to do with just deathmatch. So.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of piggyback off that, I love that point, because it's something that Ricky and I have spoken about so much, and that when we started training, many, many moons ago, we turned to each other and said, there are going to be companies that are going to look at us and say, yep, you've got such a nice look. I don't care that I haven't seen you taking a bump yet. I'm going to put you on a show because I just trust that you can do it. We were quite vocal to our coaches. This is such a big shout out to Relentless, that we were so vocal to them that we don't want to do a show until we think we're ready to do them, but until you think that we're ready to do them, right? And whatever you define as ready, because we trust them so much as coaches, we knew that their definition of ready was you knew the fundamentals. If you got lost in a match because